What is a special needs trust? A special needs trust is established for the sole benefit of the person living with a disability. It is a financial planning tool available to individuals, families, and friends, and it is utilized for supplemental needs, not basic support. And that's a big question mark, right? Why are we here? We're going to learn about what supplemental needs are and what basic support is. They are governed by trust language and applicable statutes. Special needs trusts are considered an exempt asset. That means they are not counting when Social Security, Medicaid, food stamps, and HUD housing are looking at an individual's resources or assets. There are three types of trusts. There are first party trusts, which are funded with the individual's own funds, meaning if an individual has receives a personal injury settlement, they can put those funds into a first party trust and maintain their eligibility for SSI and Medicaid. There are third party trusts, which is someone else's funds for the benefit of the individual, meaning mom, dad, grandma, grandpa can put funds into a third party trust, and that individual is not going to lose their eligibility for Medicaid or SSI. And then there's pooled trust, which is a nonprofit trustee. That's what Midwest Special Needs Trust is. A pooled trust administers both first parties and third parties, but there's also a charitable mission to what they do. Special needs trusts may have age limits. I'm not going to get into them. They may have initial contribution limits, meaning some pooled trust administrators require a minimum amount to open a trust. All banks have a minimum amount. Some attorneys have a minimum amount, and those amounts can vary between $500 and $1 million. So there are initial contribution limits. And then we have special needs trust administrators absolutely have distribution standards. There are requirements on what the trust can and can't be used for. And Social Security has made those requirements very, very clear. So we're going to talk about what those are. So distributions from a special needs trust are broad. This list is not exhaustive by any means, but these are the types of things that I see on a regular basis. So allowable distributions include medical expenses, therapies, education expenses, clothing, non-food grocery items, all of those household items that just add up, cleaning supplies, toilet paper, bar handles for the shower, all of those things are allowable expenses. Durable medical equipment, transportation, including a vehicle, fuel, and modifications, personal property, travel expenses for the beneficiary and another person, home modifications, all telecommunications, hobbies, entertainment, camps, and what we're going to touch on this more. So but I want to point it out here is distributions to enable account are an allowable expense from a special needs trust. But you can see here that anything that is considered a supplemental need is an allowable expense. And we kind of broadly, like I said, we broadly define that. Our purpose is to make sure that it is for the benefit of the beneficiary. And so this list allows for us to make decisions as trustees to determine that these are for the benefit and for the supplemental need of the beneficiary. I do have a list, though, of things that are not allowable. And the not allowable includes housing. And by housing, I mean rent, mortgage, and room and board, and utilities, water, gas, electric, sewer, and trash. These are defined by Social Security, and they make it very clear in their rules that if a person is receiving SSI, they may not have a distribution from their special needs trust for housing expenses because it could cause a reduction in their SSI. Food is also in there, no food. So I like to tell people I can pay for the movie, but I can't pay for the popcorn. We also can't give cash to the individual. That counts as income. So I can't write a check to an individual, to the beneficiary, even if it's $25. I can't write them a check. We cannot make gifts to others. So because it is for the benefit of the beneficiary. So even though we want to buy everybody a birthday present and we want to get everybody, all of our caregivers, Christmas gifts, we can't do that. You can't utilize a special needs trust for that. Some trustees have additional rules. They don't allow for gambling or weapons. They don't allow for homes to be purchased or funeral expenses after the death of the individual, and that varies by trustee. That is a list of not allowable is so much shorter than the list of allowable. The number of requests I see and have seen over the last 10 plus years includes prom. I've sent many young adults to different kinds of proms. The number of trips that folks have taken to Disney, those are all allowable expenses. I recently sent somebody overseas and paid her way to be a missionary overseas in China. I've education expenses to go to college or to pay for somebody's first apartment, their needs, their dishes and their silverware and their cleaning supplies in their first apartment. All of those things are allowable. Anything I can do, or as a trustee, I can do to enhance or provide a benefit to the beneficiary, I am going to do. One thing I want to say about housing, and it's specifically related to room and board, is if an individual is living in a facility, I can pay the difference between a private room rate and a non-private room rate. So I can pay for somebody to have a private room if they're paying their Social Security, and then that little bit of extra that allows for them to have a private room, I can pay that private room differential, which is a great way to utilize trust funds for somebody who may be older or for somebody who is of a younger population but may need to live in a facility for whatever reason. They don't necessarily have to live with an older population. They can have a private room. Some of the things to keep in mind when we're looking at distributions from a special needs trust: it must be for the primary benefit of the individual. Making distributions for housing, food, and cash can impact benefits. And trustees have the ultimate decision regarding distributions. We may consult with co-trustees or trust advisors or the beneficiary, and they may request they want things. And ultimately, as trustee, we have that decision. Special needs trusts are reviewed by the Social Security Administration, Medicaid, food stamps, and HUD housing. So all of these government agencies can call or send letters and say, we would like to look at the special needs trust, and you need to submit the special needs trust and all of the distributions. The trust agreement may be exempt, but the distributions can impact benefits, which is why the concern really lies in what kind of distributions are you making, and are they for the benefit of the beneficiary? Again, that list of allowable is so long that you can probably pay for somebody's expenses that are not housing and food expenses so that they can meet those expenses with their monthly cash benefit. I didn't mention this, but we can pay for all pharmacy bills, items not covered by Medicaid and Medicare. The hearing aids that Medicaid pays for aren't great, right? So maybe you want the trust to pay for better hearing aids. I have purchased quite a few wheelchairs that Medicaid maybe was going to pay for a wheelchair, but it was not going to be good. And so the beneficiary and the co-trustee and the family came and said, Casey, can we get a better wheelchair? Yeah, absolutely we can. So the special needs trust can be used to enhance the beneficiary's life and to provide for their supplemental needs. One thing I didn't mention, and it is on my slide, is the importance of purchasing an irrevocable prepaid burial policy. I can't tell you enough that if you have a special needs trust, please, please, please purchase a prepaid burial policy, because not every trustee is going to be able to pay for funeral expenses after the death of the beneficiary. So you're going to want to have to purchase that. with those trust funds. There is no upper limit in Missouri. I've seen funeral policies range from about 5,000 to 25,000, and we don't want that burden on the family. So if there are funds available in the special needs trust to purchase that policy, please do so. Thank you so much again, and please feel free to call or email with any questions that you have. And thank you, everybody at the St. Louis Arc, for allowing me to be here this evening.